The bright morning sunlight streamed through the large airport windows as the Wilson family made their way through the bustling terminal. Michael Wilson checked his watch and smiled at his wife Diane. They were right on time. A small miracle, considering how the morning had started. "Dad, how much longer?" asked 10-year-old Layla, bouncing on her toes as she clutched her well-loved stuffed penguin. "Not too long now, sweetie," Michael replied, gently ruffling her curly hair. "We'll be on the plane before you know it." Beside Layla, her older brother Tyler was glued to his handheld game, his tongue poking out in concentration as his thumbs moved rapidly across the buttons. At 12 years old, he was trying his best to appear unimpressed by the whole trip, but Michael had caught the flicker of excitement in his eyes when they'd first arrived at the airport. This trip to Hawaii had been years in the making. Between Michael's demanding schedule as a neurosurgeon and Diane's work as a civil rights attorney, finding time when both of them could take 2 full weeks off had seemed nearly impossible. But here they were, finally making it happen. "I still can't believe we're doing this," Diane whispered, squeezing Michael's hand as they walked. "The kids are going to lose their minds when they see the ocean." Michael nodded, feeling a warm contentment spread through his chest. Neither he nor Diane had many opportunities for vacations growing up. His parents had worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, and family trips had consisted of occasional weekends at his grandmother's house 2 towns over. Diane's childhood hadn't been much different. Now, watching his children excitedly point at planes through the massive windows, Michael felt a deep sense of gratitude for how far they'd come. "Should we tell them now or wait until we get to the gate?" Michael asked quietly. Diane's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Let's wait. I want to see their faces when they find out." What the kids didn't know was that Michael had splurged on first-class tickets for the family. It was their first time flying in such luxury, and he couldn't wait to see their reaction. As a surgeon, Michael made a comfortable living, but he and Diane were careful with money, saving for college funds and retirement. They raised their children with the same values their parents had instilled in them: hard work, education, and appreciation for what they had. "Dad, can we get something to eat?" Tyler asked, finally looking up from his game. "I'm starving." "We just had breakfast 2 hours ago," Diane laughed, shaking her head. "That was forever ago." Layla chimed in, clearly siding with her brother on this important matter. Michael checked the time again. "We have enough time to grab a quick snack, but nothing too heavy. We don't want upset stomachs on the plane." They stopped at a small cafe, where the kids debated the merits of various pastries while Michael ordered coffee for himself and Diane. As they waited, Michael noticed an elderly couple smiling at them from a nearby table. "Hawaii?" the older gentleman asked, nodding at their colorful luggage tags. "Yes, sir," Michael replied with a smile. "First time for the kids. You're going to have a wonderful time," the man's wife said warmly. "We go every year. There's nothing like watching your children experience the island for the first time." After their snack, they continued toward their gate. Michael felt his phone buzz in his pocket. A text from the hospital checking if a junior surgeon could consult with him about a patient next week. He quickly typed back that he'd be unavailable, but offered to schedule a call when they returned. After 15 years at Memorial Hospital, Michael had earned this break, and he was determined to be fully present for his family. "Okay, everyone," he announced as they approached their gate. "Let's double-check our boarding passes and make sure we have everything." Diane gathered the family in a quiet corner away from the crowd, and Michael pulled out the boarding documents from his carry-on. "I have a little surprise for everyone," he said, watching their curious faces. "This trip is really special for us, so I thought we should travel in style." He handed each family member their boarding pass, waiting for the realization to sink. Tyler was the first to notice. "Wait, these say first class." His eyes widened as he looked up at his parents in disbelief. "Are we really sitting in first class?" "We are," Diane confirmed, beaming at their reactions. Layla gasped dramatically. "Like the fancy part with the big chairs? Where they give you real cups?" "Real cups, real silverware, and enough legroom that Dad won't be cramped the whole flight." Michael laughed, referring to his tall frame that always suffered in economy seating. But I thought first class was super expensive, Tyler said, suddenly looking concerned. He was old enough to understand money matters and had always been sensitive about costs. Michael crouched down to meet his son's eyes. It is a bit more expensive, but Mom and I have been saving for this trip for a long time. Sometimes it's worth spending a little extra for special experiences, especially when it's something we'll all remember forever. This is gonna be the best trip ever, Layla declared, doing a little dance of excitement that made several nearby passengers smile. As they waited for boarding to begin, Michael watched his children with pride. Despite their excitement, they were well behaved, keeping their voices at a reasonable level and staying close by. They had always taught their kids to be respectful of others in public spaces, a value both he and Diane held dear. The boarding announcement finally came over the loudspeaker, calling for first-class passengers to board first. Michael gathered their carry-ons while Diane organized the boarding passes. "That's us," Tyler said, still sounding amazed at their good fortune. They joined the short line of well-dressed business travelers and other vacationers waiting to board in the priority section. Michael noticed Layla suddenly becoming shy, clutching her penguin tighter as she looked at the other passengers. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "We belong here just like everyone else." Diane gave him a knowing look. They had both experienced moments throughout their lives where they felt out of place or were made to feel they didn't belong. As a black family dressed casually for travel rather than in business attire, they sometimes received subtle, and occasionally not so subtle, questioning looks. They had taught their children to hold their heads high and move through the world with confidence, but also prepared them for the unfortunate realities they might face. "Remember when we talked about taking up space?" Diane asked the children, quietly. "You deserve to be wherever you are, stand tall." Both kids nodded solemnly, straightening their shoulders slightly. Michael felt a surge of love for his wife and her gentle wisdom. As they waited, Layla's initial shyness faded, replaced by bubbling excitement as she peppered her mother with questions about what first class would be like. Tyler, trying to play it cool, was nevertheless sneaking glances at the sleek cabin visible through the jet bridge doorway. Michael took in the scene, his beautiful family, the adventure ahead of them, the culmination of years of hard work and planning. In just a few hours, they would be landing in paradise, ready to build memories that would last a lifetime. The stress of his demanding job, the late nights at the hospital, the missed dinners and school events. In this moment, the sacrifices felt worth it. "What are you thinking about?" Diane asked softly, catching his reflective expression. "Just how lucky I am," he replied, his voice slightly husky with emotion. "To be here with all of you." She leaned into him, understanding in her eyes. "We're the lucky ones, having you lead our family adventure." The line began to move forward as boarding commenced. Michael took a deep breath, savoring the moment of anticipation. The Wilson family was about to embark on their dream vacation, starting with their very first experience of first-class travel. Whatever lay ahead, whether smooth sailing or unexpected turbulence, they would face it together, just as they always had. Little did they know that their journey would involve much more than just a tropical paradise. The lessons of patience, dignity, and standing firm in who you are were about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. The Wilson family stepped toward the gate, boarding passes in hand. Michael led the way, with Diane right behind him, gently guiding the children forward. The excitement was palpable. Layla couldn't stop bouncing on her toes, while Tyler tried his best to look cool and collected, though the slight tremor in his hands gave away his thrill. "First-class passengers, we're ready to begin boarding now," announced the gate agent. A friendly-looking older woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "That's us," Layla whispered loudly, tugging on her mother's sleeve. Michael smiled down at his daughter. "Yes, that's us. Remember what we talked about, though, inside voices even when we're excited." The family took their place in the short priority boarding line behind a businessman in a crisp suit and an elderly couple who nodded politely at them. Michael noticed Tyler standing a little straighter, mimicking the posture of the businessman ahead of them. The boy caught his father's amused glance and grinned sheepishly. As they approached the front of the line, Michael handed their boarding passes to the gate agent, who scanned them efficiently. "Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Have a wonderful flight," she said warmly, returning the documents. The family moved forward through the jet bridge, the kids' excitement growing with each step. Just as they reached the aircraft door, a flight attendant with perfectly styled blonde hair stepped into their path. Her name tag read, Patricia Reynolds. She looked the family up and down, her gaze lingering on their casual travel clothes. Comfortable, pants and polo shirts for Michael and Tyler, and simple cotton dresses for Diane and Layla. "Excuse me," Patricia said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, "but I believe the economy boarding will begin in about 20 minutes. If you'll just step back to the gate." Michael blinked in surprise while Diane stiffened beside him. Before either could respond, Tyler spoke up. "But we have first-class tickets," he said, confusion clear in his voice. He held up his boarding pass as proof. Patricia barely glanced at the boarding pass. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice taking on a condescending tone. "This section is for first-class passengers only." Michael took a deep breath, keeping his expression neutral despite the familiar sinking feeling in his stomach. He'd encountered this kind of assumption before, the implicit suggestion that his family didn't look like they belonged in a premium space. "There's no mistake," he said evenly, offering his own boarding pass again. "We're in seats 2A through 2D. The flight attendant took the boarding pass, examining it with narrowed eyes as if searching for a forgery. Behind them, other passengers were beginning to stack up in the jet bridge. Michael could feel Tyler shifting uncomfortably beside him, and Layla had gone unusually quiet, pressing herself against Diane's side. "I see," Patricia finally said, handing back the boarding pass. But rather than stepping aside, she added in a low voice that was still audible to those nearby, "Well, you certainly don't act like you belong in first class." A hush fell over the immediate area. An older gentleman behind them cleared his throat awkwardly. Diane's back went ramrod straight and Michael could feel the tension radiating from her. He placed a gentle hand on her arm, a silent request to let him handle the situation. "I'm sorry," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Patricia's cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't back down. "First-class passengers typically understand boarding procedures and don't bring such exuberant children into the premium cabin," she said with a pointed look at Layla, who was now half hiding behind her mother. Michael felt a flash of anger, but kept his composure. He was painfully aware of his children watching, learning from how he handled this moment. He was also conscious of the growing line of passengers behind them, some now whispering among themselves. "Our children are well-behaved travelers," Diane said, her attorney voice slipping out, measured, precise, and brooking no argument. "And we are very familiar with boarding procedures, having flown many times before." "Perhaps not in first class," Patricia muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Michael noticed Tyler's hands had curled into fists at his sides and the boy's jaw was clenched tight. Layla looked on the verge of tears. This was supposed to be the beginning of their dream vacation, not a lesson in dealing with prejudice. "Let's just get to our seats," Michael said to his family, deliberately keeping his voice steady. To Patricia, he simply said, "Excuse us, please," in a tone that made it clear he expected her to move aside. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped back, allowing them to board. As they moved past her into the cabin, another flight attendant, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard. Let me show you to your seats," he offered, seemingly oblivious to the tension of the previous exchange. As they settled into the spacious first-class seats, Michael could see both children were subdued. The sparkle had gone out of Layla's eyes, and Tyler was staring out the window, his posture rigid. "Hey," Michael said softly, leaning across the aisle toward his son. "You okay, buddy?" Tyler didn't turn from the window. "Why did she say that?" he asked, his voice smaller than usual. We weren't doing anything wrong. Diane exchanged a look with Michael across the aisle, years of shared experiences and conversations passing between them in that glance. They had known this moment would come. It always did, in one form or another. They'd prepared their children as best they could, but experiencing it firsthand was different from any hypothetical conversation. Sometimes people make judgments based on what they see on the outside, Michael explained carefully. They look at our skin color or our clothes or the way we talk, and they make assumptions about who we are and where we belong. But that's not fair, Layla said, her lower lip trembling slightly. No, it's not fair at all, Diane agreed, squeezing her daughter's hand. But what matters is how we respond to it. We know who we are and what we've earned. Nobody can take that away from us unless we let them. Michael watched as Tyler processed this, the boy's expressive face showing his struggle to understand. So what do we do? Tyler finally asked, looking between his parents. We hold our heads high, Michael said firmly. We don't let anyone make us feel like we don't belong somewhere we have every right to be. And most importantly, we don't let their ignorance steal our joy. As they spoke, the male flight attendant approached with a tray of pre-flight drinks. Orange juice for the young travelers, he offered with a warm smile. And perhaps champagne for the adults? Orange juice sounds perfect, Michael said, grateful for the interruption. Thank you. He glanced at the man's name tag. Robert. As Robert distributed the drinks, Patricia appeared at the front of the cabin, clearly going through her pre-flight routine. When she spotted the Wilson family settled in their seats, a flicker of annoyance crossed her face before she quickly masked it. Look, Michael said quietly to his family. We're not going to let one person's attitude ruin our trip. This is still going to be amazing. Layla nodded, some of her natural bounce returning as she sipped her juice. Tyler remained thoughtful, but his shoulders had relaxed somewhat. The cabin continued to fill as more first-class passengers boarded. An elegant older woman took the seat across from Tyler, giving him a friendly nod as she settled in. A young couple with matching honeymoon t-shirts occupied the row behind Michael and Layla, their happiness radiating outward. Everyone here seems nice, Layla whispered to her father. Just not that one lady. Most people are good, Michael assured her. And even those who aren't usually have their own struggles we know nothing about. As the boarding process continued, Michael noticed several passengers who had witnessed the earlier exchange at the door giving Patricia cool looks as she moved through the cabin. The older woman across from Tyler even made a point of warmly greeting the Wilson children, asking them about their upcoming Hawaiian adventure with genuine interest. Diane leaned across the aisle toward Michael. This isn't over, she whispered, nodding discreetly toward Patricia, who was now avoiding eye contact with their entire row. Michael nodded in agreement. The incident at the door might have passed, but something told him they hadn't heard the last of flight attendant Patricia Reynolds. He just hoped that whatever came next wouldn't further dampen their children's excitement for the trip. As the captain's voice came over the intercom welcoming everyone aboard, Michael made a silent promise to himself. No matter what happened with Patricia, he would ensure this vacation was everything his family had dreamed of. They had worked too hard and waited too long to let anyone diminish this experience. The engines rumbled to life, and despite the rough start, Michael felt a renewed sense of anticipation. Sometimes life's most meaningful lessons came from unexpected places. Perhaps this would be one of those moments, a chance to show his children how to face unfairness with dignity and strength. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Michael rolled his shoulders, trying to release some of the tension that had built up during the uncomfortable boarding experience. Across the aisle, Diane was helping Layla figure out how to use the entertainment system on her screen, while Tyler had already put on his headphones and started watching a superhero movie. You folks need anything? Robert, the friendly flight attendant, stopped by their row with a genuine smile. We're good for now, thank you, Michael replied, returning the smile. As Robert moved on, Michael noticed Patricia at the front of the cabin, arranging items in a service cart. She had been noticeably absent from their section since takeoff, with Robert handling all their needs instead. Michael wasn't complaining. The less they had to interact with her, the better. But he could tell from the tight line of her shoulders that she was still aware of them. "Dad?" Tyler had paused his movie and was looking at Michael with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Michael turned his attention fully to his son. Tyler glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned across the aisle. "Why didn't you get mad at that flight attendant? If someone talked to me like that, I'd be really angry." Michael considered his answer carefully. It was a good question, one that cut to the heart of many discussions he and Diane had had with their children over the years. "I was angry," he admitted quietly. But getting angry wouldn't have helped the situation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm and not give someone the reaction they're expecting. Tyler frowned, processing this. "But doesn't that just let them get away with being mean?" "Not necessarily," Michael said. "There are different ways to stand up for yourself. Showing dignity can be more powerful than showing anger." Their conversation paused as Patricia finally approached their row, her professional smile firmly in place, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Beverage, service," she announced coolly. "What can I get for you?" "I'll have sparkling water, please," Michael said politely. "Same for me," Diane added. "Apple juice, please," Layla piped up. "Coke," Tyler said, a bit more curtly than usual. Patricia nodded and began preparing their drinks with efficient movements. Michael noticed she was being scrupulously correct in her service, if not particularly warm. As she handed Michael his sparkling water, he noticed something on her name badge. A small memorial ribbon pin next to her name. It was the same type of pin Memorial Hospital gave out to families of patients who had received life-saving treatment. Michael had seen hundreds of them over his years as a surgeon. A thought struck him, and he looked more closely at Patricia's face. There was something vaguely familiar about her, though he couldn't quite place it. As a neurosurgeon who had treated thousands of patients, he sometimes encountered family members without immediately connecting them to specific cases. "Excuse me?" he said as she was about to move away. "That ribbon on your badge, is that from Memorial Hospital?" Patricia froze, her hand automatically going to the small pin. "Yes," she said after a moment, some of the coldness leaving her voice. "My father was a patient there last year." Michael nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. "Reynolds?" he said quietly. "Would your father be Harold Reynolds?" The color drained from Patricia's face. "How did you know that?" "I'm Dr. Michael Wilson," he said simply. "I was your father's neurosurgeon." The tray Patricia was holding wobbled slightly, and Robert, who was passing by, quickly stepped in to stabilize it. "Everything okay here?" Robert asked, looking between them. Patricia didn't seem capable of answering. Her eyes were fixed on Michael's face, recognition and shock washing over her features. "Everything's fine," Michael assured Robert. "Just catching up on an old connection." Robert nodded and moved on, though he kept glancing back curiously. Diane had stopped helping Layla with her screen and was watching the interaction carefully, ready to intervene if needed. "You're Dr. Wilson?" Patricia finally managed to say. Her voice had lost all of its earlier condescension, replaced by disbelief. "Yes," Michael confirmed. "Your father had a ruptured brain aneurysm, if I remember correctly. It was a complicated case, but he pulled through remarkably well." Patricia's hand trembled slightly as she set the drinks tray down on an empty seat. "You saved his life," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The other doctors said it was a miracle he survived without major deficits." "He was a fighter," Michael said simply, "and he had a family who clearly cared deeply for him. That makes a difference in recovery." Tyler and Layla were watching this exchange with wide eyes, clearly surprised by this turn of events. Diane reached across the aisle and squeezed Michael's hand, a silent message of support and pride. I never saw you," Patricia stammered. "I mean, I met with a doctor, but it wasn't—" "I was in surgery when you arrived," Michael explained. "My colleague Dr. Chen probably spoke with you initially. I operated on your father for nearly 7 hours that night. 7 hours, Patricia repeated, looking dazed. Michael could almost see her mental image of him reconstructing itself, from the casually dressed black man she had deemed out of place in first class to the skilled surgeon who had saved her father's life. He's doing well now? Michael asked gently. Patricia nodded, seeming to gather herself somewhat. Yes, he's back to gardening, walking every day. He just danced at my sister's wedding last month. I'm glad to hear that, Michael said sincerely. It's why I do what I do. There was an awkward silence as Patricia clearly struggled with what to say next. The realization of how she had treated the man who had saved her father's life was visibly washing over her. Dr. Wilson, she began, but was interrupted by the call button from another passenger. You should get that, Michael said kindly. We can talk more later. Patricia nodded, still looking shaken, and moved away to attend to the other passenger. As soon as she was out of earshot, Tyler leaned across the aisle, eyes wide with amazement. Dad, you operated on her dad? That's like the most perfect comeback ever. Michael shook his head. It's not about comebacks, Tyler. Life is too short for that kind of thinking. But she was so mean to us. Layla pointed out, her young face serious. And now she knows you're a doctor who saved her dad. Sometimes people judge others based on what they see on the outside, Diane explained gently. They make assumptions without knowing the whole story. Like when Patricia saw us, she didn't see a doctor and a lawyer and their kids going on vacation, Tyler said slowly, working it out. She just saw what she expected to see, Michael finished for him. And that's a limitation. In her thinking, not a reflection on us. Diane smiled at their son. Exactly. And that's why we've always taught you both to look deeper than the surface with people you meet. The family fell silent for a moment, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Around them, the cabin hummed with the white noise of flight. Other passengers, chatting quietly or watching their screens. A few minutes later, Robert returned with warm cookies for the children, winking conspiratorially as he handed them over. Compliments of the cabin crew, he said. Though Michael suspected this might be Robert's personal initiative rather than a team decision. As the children happily accepted the treats, Michael noticed Patricia at the front of the cabin, watching their interaction. When she caught his eye, she quickly looked away, but not before Michael saw the conflict on her face. Mom, Layla whispered, leaning toward Diane. Do you think she feels bad now? I think she has a lot to think about, Diane replied carefully. Michael gazed out the window at the endless blue sky, reflecting on the unexpected turn their flight had taken. He hadn't revealed his identity to embarrass Patricia or to claim some kind of moral victory. The revelation had simply happened, and now they all had to navigate the aftermath. In his years as a surgeon, Michael had learned that people were at their most vulnerable when facing their own mistakes. How Patricia chose to handle this moment would reveal far more about her character than her initial behavior had. The flight to Hawaii was long, with several more hours stretching ahead of them. What had begun as an uncomfortable situation had transformed into something more complex, a moment of recognition that might, just might, lead to understanding. As the plane soared over endless miles of ocean, Michael returned to his book, but his mind kept drifting to the look on Patricia's face when she realized who he was. It wasn't satisfaction he felt at her discomfort, but rather a quiet hope that sometimes when people know better, they do better. The flight continued, with a noticeable shift in the atmosphere around the Wilson family. Robert had taken over most of their service needs, his friendly demeanor a welcome change from Patricia's earlier coldness. But Michael could feel the occasional glances from other passengers who had witnessed the earlier exchange at boarding. Some curious, others sympathetic. About an hour into the flight, Tyler paused his movie again and removed his headphones. He'd been unusually quiet since the revelation about Patricia's father. Dad, he said, turning to look across the aisle. How did you remember her dad? Don't you see like hundreds of patients? Michael smiled at his son's perceptiveness. Thousands, actually over my career, but some cases stick with you. Harold Reynolds was one of them. Why? Layla chimed in, always curious. Michael considered how to explain this to his children. Well, Mr. Reynolds came in with a very serious condition, a ruptured aneurysm in his brain. That's like a balloon in a blood vessel that has popped and is causing dangerous bleeding. That sounds really scary, Layla said, her eyes wide. It is, Michael nodded. Many people don't survive it. But Mr. Reynolds had this incredible fighting spirit. And during the surgery, which was very complicated, everything just clicked. Sometimes in medicine, you get these moments where skill and luck and timing all align perfectly. Like when Coach talks about being in the zone during a game. Tyler asked. Exactly like that, Michael grinned. It was one of those surgeries where, afterward, I just knew he was going to make it, despite the odds. And that's Patricia's dad. Diane added softly. Sometimes life has strange ways of connecting people. As if summoned by her name, Patricia appeared beside their row. She had composed herself since their earlier interaction, but there was still a noticeable change in her demeanor, the artificial smile replaced by a more genuine, if uncertain, expression. I've brought some extra pillows and blankets for your family, she said, her voice lacking its earlier edge. The cabin can get chilly during long flights. Thank you, Diane said, accepting the items with a polite nod. Patricia hesitated, clearly wanting to say more but struggling to find the words. Finally, she took a deep breath. Dr. Wilson, I wondered if I might speak with you privately when you have a moment. Her eyes flicked briefly to the children, then back to Michael. Michael nodded. Of course. I'll be in the galley when you're ready, she said, then moved on to assist other passengers. Tyler raised his eyebrows at his father. Are you going to go talk to her? Yes, Michael said simply. People deserve a chance to make things right when they've made a mistake. Even when they've been mean? Layla asked, her small face serious. Especially then, Diane answered. That's often when people need kindness the most, when they're realizing they've done something wrong. Michael squeezed his wife's hand, grateful for her wisdom and the united front they always presented to their children. They had discussed many times how to help their kids navigate a world that wouldn't always treat them fairly, and moments like this were opportunities to put those teachings into practice. After a few minutes, Michael unbuckled his seatbelt and made his way to the galley at the front of the cabin. Patricia was there alone, organizing a service cart with mechanical precision. She looked up when he approached, her hand stilling on the napkins she had been folding. Dr. Wilson, she began, her voice tight with emotion. I need to apologize for my behavior earlier. Michael nodded but remained silent, giving her space to continue. There's no excuse for how I treated you and your family, she said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. I made assumptions based on, well, it doesn't matter what they were based on. They were wrong, and my behavior was inexcusable. We all make judgments sometimes, Michael said quietly. The question is what we do after we realize our mistake. Patricia twisted the gold band on her ring finger, a nervous gesture that reminded Michael of the worried family members he often spoke with at the hospital. My father talks about you, you know, she said suddenly. Not by name, we never knew your name, but he talks about the doctor with the magic hands who saved his life. He says he felt safe the moment you walked into his room, even though he was terrified of the surgery. Michael felt a warm glow of professional satisfaction. These were the moments that made the long hours, the missed family dinners, the wait of life or death decisions worthwhile. Knowing that somewhere out there people were living their lives because of work he'd done with his hands and mind. I'm glad I could help him, he said simply. Help him? Patricia repeated, a catch in her voice. Dr. Wilson, you gave him back to us. He's walked both my sisters down the aisle. He's teaching my son to fish. He's still here because of you. She paused, visibly collecting herself. And then today I treated his surgeon, the man who gave us those extra years, like he didn't belong in first class. Because I didn't look like what you expected, Michael finished for her, not unkindly. Patricia nodded, her cheeks flushing with shame. Yes, and I'm deeply sorry for that. Michael considered her for a long moment. He had encountered situations like this before. People who realized too late that their prejudices had led them to misjudge him. Some became defensive, doubling down rather than acknowledging their mistake. Others overcompensated, becoming awkwardly deferential. But genuine reflection was rarer and more valuable. "I accept your apology," he said finally. "And I appreciate that you're willing to acknowledge the mistake directly." Relief washed over Patricia's face, but Michael wasn't quite finished. "But it's not just me who deserves an apology," he continued gently. "My children were hurt by what happened at boarding. They felt unwelcome in a space they had every right to be in." Patricia's expression fell. "Oh God, your children. Of course." She ran a hand over her face. "I didn't even think about how they would feel. I was so focused on the adults," Michael nodded. "It's a common oversight. But children absorb these moments deeply." "I'll apologize to them as well," Patricia said immediately. "And to your wife." "Thank you," Michael said. "That would mean a lot." A small ding sounded, and Patricia glanced at the service panel. "I should get back to work," she said. "But Dr. Wilson, thank you. Not just for my father, but for giving me the chance to make this right." Michael returned to his seat, where Diane raised a questioning eyebrow. He gave her a slight nod. Everything was okay. A few minutes later, Patricia approached their row again, this time with a different energy about her. She knelt down slightly so she was at eye level with the children. "Tyler, Layla," she said, having clearly made an effort to remember their names. "I wanted to say I'm very sorry for how I spoke to your family earlier. I made a mistake, and it wasn't fair to any of you." Tyler looked at her appraisingly with all the seriousness a 12-year-old could muster. "Our dad says everyone makes mistakes. It's what you do after that counts." Patricia smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Your dad is very wise." She turned to Diane. "Mrs. Wilson, I owe you an apology as well." "It's actually Dr. Wilson, too," Michael interjected with a small smile. "My wife is an attorney." Patricia's eyes widened, slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Dr. Wilson," she corrected herself, addressing Diane. "I'm truly sorry for my behavior." Diane nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you for acknowledging that." As Patricia moved away to continue her duties, an older gentleman across the aisle leaned toward the Wilson family. "Couldn't help overhearing," he said with a kind smile. "What you did there, sir, that was class. Most folks wouldn't have been so gracious." Michael shook his head slightly. "We all need grace sometimes." The rest of the flight took on a different tone. Patricia returned regularly to check on them, her service now genuinely attentive rather than coolly professional. Other passengers, who had witnessed the earlier tension, now engaged the family in friendly conversation. The elegant older woman sitting near Tyler turned out to be a retired music teacher who delighted Layla with stories of famous composers. Robert, the friendly flight attendant, stopped by with a wink and extra desserts for everyone. "Heard you're quite the hero, Doc," he said quietly to Michael. "Patty's dad was in a bad way from what she's told me." "Just doing my job," Michael replied. "Dad always says that." Tyler rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Mom says he doesn't know how to take a compliment." This drew laughter from those around them, and Michael felt the last of the tension from earlier dissolving. What had begun as an uncomfortable confrontation had transformed into something unexpected, a moment of connection and understanding. As the plane began its initial descent toward Hawaii, Diane leaned across the aisle toward her husband. "You know what I'm thinking?" she murmured. "What's that?" Michael asked, looking at his wife's thoughtful expression. "This whole incident, it might end up being one of the most valuable parts of this trip for the kids." Michael glanced at Tyler and Layla, who were chatting animatedly about the activities they planned for their vacation. Despite the rocky start, their excitement had returned in full force. "I think you might be right," he agreed. "Some lessons can't be taught, only experienced." Outside the window, the endless blue of the Pacific stretched toward the horizon, and somewhere ahead, the islands of Hawaii were waiting. The flight was almost over, but the story that had unfolded in the cabin a story of assumptions, revelations, and second chances, would remain with the Wilson family long after they returned home. The plane touched down on Hawaiian soil with a gentle bump, followed by the familiar sensation of deceleration as the pilots applied the brakes. Layla clapped her hands in excitement while Tyler tried to play it cool despite the grin spreading across his face. "We're here." Layla bounced in her seat, looking out the window at the palm trees and brilliant blue sky. "Remember to gather all your things," Diane reminded the children as the seatbelt sign dinged off. "Check the seat pockets and under your seats." As passengers began the usual post-landing shuffle, retrieving items from overhead bins, stretching after the long flight, checking phones that had been in airplane mode, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Honolulu. Local time is 2:17 p.m. and the temperature is a beautiful 84 degrees. On behalf of our entire crew, we'd like to thank you for flying with us today. Enjoy your stay in paradise." Michael helped Layla with her small backpack while Tyler carefully tucked his gaming device into its case. The family had mastered the art of efficient travel over the years, with each person responsible for their own carry-on items. As they prepared to exit the plane, Patricia approached their row one last time. "Dr. and Dr. Wilson," she said, addressing both Michael and Diane with their proper titles. "Thank you again for your understanding today. I hope you and your children have a wonderful vacation." She handed Michael a small envelope. "The airline would like to offer your family premium lounge access for your return flight, as well as priority boarding. It's a small gesture, but we want you to know that what happened today doesn't reflect our company's values." "Thank you," Michael said, accepting the envelope. "That's very thoughtful." Patricia hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "I've also included my father's phone number. He would be honored to speak with you if you're willing. He's never had the chance to thank you personally." Michael was touched by the gesture. "I'd like that," he said sincerely. "It's always special to connect with patients after they've recovered." As they made their way off the plane, Robert gave them a friendly wave from where he stood by the cockpit door. "Enjoy Hawaii, Wilson family. Don't forget the sunscreen." Layla giggled and waved back enthusiastically. "We won't." In the jet bridge, they encountered the older couple who had been seated nearby during the flight. The gentleman tipped his hat to Michael. "Quite a flight, wasn't it?" he said with a knowing smile. "My wife and I were impressed with how you handled that situation. Takes character." "That's kind of you to say," Michael replied. "We've been coming to Hawaii for 30 years, the man's wife added. "If you need any recommendations for family activities, we'd be happy to share our favorites." They chatted briefly about local attractions as they walked toward baggage claim, with Diane jotting down a few suggestions in her phone's notes app. By the time they reached the main terminal, the couple had given them the names of 3 can't-miss beaches and a family-friendly restaurant that served the best pineapple upside-down cake on the island. As they waited for their luggage, Tyler grew quiet, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What's on your mind, buddy?" Michael asked, nudging his son gently with his elbow. Tyler looked up at his father. "I'm just thinking about what happened on the plane, with Patricia." "What about it?" "Well," Tyler hesitated, organizing his thoughts. "At first I was really mad at her, but then when she apologized, she seemed really sorry. And now I feel I don't know, weird about it." Michael nodded encouragingly. "Weird how?" "Like, I'm still a little mad about how she made us feel, but I also feel sorry for her, because she was so embarrassed when she found out who you were. Is that normal?" Diane joined the conversation, having overheard Tyler's question. "It's completely normal to have mixed feelings, Tyler. Situations like these aren't black and white." "Your mom's right," Michael agreed. "It's possible to still feel hurt by someone's actions while also recognizing their humanity and capacity to change." Tyler pondered this. "So it's okay that I don't just forgive and forget right away?" "Absolutely," Diane assured him. "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't hurt you. It means choosing not to let that hurt control your future actions. And sometimes," Michael added, "the most powerful response to unfairness isn't anger but grace. Not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve peace." Their conversation was interrupted as their luggage began appearing on the carousel. The family worked together to collect their bags, with Tyler proudly taking responsibility for one of the larger suitcases. As they headed toward the exit, a woman in a crisp airline uniform approached them. Her badge identified her as Kim Chen, customer service manager. "Dr. and Dr. Wilson?" she inquired politely. When Michael and Diane nodded, she continued, "I understand there was an incident during boarding today. On behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize and ensure that your return journey will be perfect." "Thank you," Diane said. "The situation was addressed appropriately during the flight." "I'm glad to hear that," Kim replied. "Nevertheless, we take these matters very seriously. The crew member involved has already spoken with her supervisor and will be participating in our enhanced customer service training program. I hope there won't be serious repercussions for her," Michael said. "People deserve the chance to learn and grow from mistakes." Kim looked slightly surprised, clearly, having expected a different reaction. "That's very generous of you, Dr. Wilson. I've arranged for complimentary transportation to your hotel as a small token of our apology." She gestured toward the exit, where a driver stood holding a sign with their name. "Your driver, David, is waiting to take you to your resort. He's lived on the island his whole life and can share some local insights during your drive." After thanking Kim, the family followed David to a spacious van decorated with cheerful Hawaiian flowers. As he loaded their luggage, Layla tugged on Diane's hand. "Mom, is Patricia going to get in trouble because of us?" she asked, her forehead creased with worry. "Not because of us, sweetie," Diane explained gently. "Sometimes our actions have natural consequences. But your dad spoke up for her, and I think she'll be okay." Once they were settled in the van, David welcomed them with a warm smile and fresh flower leis for everyone. "Aloha, Wilson family. Welcome to Hawaii," he said as he placed the fragrant garlands around their necks. "First time on the island?" "For the kids, yes," Michael replied. "My wife and I came here once years ago before they were born." "Ah, a return to paradise with the keiki, the children," David nodded approvingly. "You picked a perfect time to visit. The weather is beautiful and the humpback whales are still here for another few weeks." "Whales?" Layla perked up immediately. "Can we see them, Dad? Please?" "We'll definitely look into a whale-watching tour," Michael promised, smiling at his daughter's enthusiasm. As David drove them toward their resort, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the island's history, Michael found himself reflecting on the day's events. What had begun as an uncomfortable confrontation had evolved into something unexpected, a moment of connection and growth for everyone involved. 2 weeks later, as their Hawaiian adventure came to an end, the Wilson family found themselves back at the Honolulu airport for their return flight. True to the airline's promise, they were escorted to the premium lounge where they enjoyed comfortable seating and a complimentary buffet before their flight. "This is fancy," Layla whispered to Tyler as she sampled a tiny sandwich. "Yeah, not bad," Tyler agreed, trying to maintain his preteen cool despite being clearly impressed by the surroundings. When it was time to board their flight home, they were greeted by a different flight crew. The lead flight attendant welcomed them warmly, clearly having been briefed about the Wilson family. As they settled into their seats, Michael noticed an envelope tucked into the seat pocket in front of him. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dr. Wilson, I spoke with my father yesterday. For the first time since his surgery, he was able to personally thank the doctor who saved his life. He wanted me to tell you that those were the best 7 minutes of his recovery. Thank you for your compassion, both in the operating room 2 years ago and on our flight 2 weeks ago. You've taught me a valuable lesson about judgment and grace that I won't forget. Wishing you and your beautiful family safe travels, Patricia Reynolds." Michael passed the note to Diane, who read it with a small smile before squeezing his hand. "Did you ever call her father?" she asked quietly. Michael nodded. "Last Tuesday, while you and the kids were at the pool, we had a good conversation. You never mentioned it." Michael shrugged slightly. "Some moments are just between two people." As the plane taxied toward the runway, Michael looked at his family, Diane, reviewing photos on her camera. Tyler already deep into a new game, Layla gazing out the window and naming the clouds. Their Hawaiian vacation had given them everything they'd hoped for. Sun-soaked beaches, adventurous hikes, fresh tropical fruits, and plenty of family bonding. But it had also given them something unexpected, a powerful real-life lesson about prejudice, dignity, and the capacity for people to grow. It wasn't the souvenir they had planned on bringing home, but in many ways, it was the most valuable one. "Dad?" Layla said suddenly, turning from the window. "Remember when that flight attendant thought we didn't belong in first class?" "Yes, sweetie," Michael replied. "Well, I was thinking, it's kind of like when Peter Parker's uncle says, with great power comes great responsibility. You had the power to make her feel really bad, but you chose to be nice instead." Michael smiled at his daughter's superhero reference. "That's a good way of looking at it. Plus," Tyler added without looking up from his game, "living well is the best revenge." Diane chuckled. "Where did you hear that?" "Grandma says it all the time." Tyler grinned. As the plane lifted off, carrying them back toward home, Michael reflected on his children's wisdom. Sometimes the most profound lessons came from the most unexpected teachers, whether it was a flight attendant who learned to see beyond her biases or his children, who were already learning to navigate the complexities of human interaction with compassion and dignity. The Hawaiian sun glinted off the plane's wing as they soared into the bright blue sky, heading home with memories and lessons that would last a lifetime.